It was a crisp autumn afternoon in suburban Chicago, the kind where the air carried the sharp tang of fallen leaves mingling with the faint smoke from neighborhood chimneys. The wind whispered through the branches of the old oak tree in our backyard, rustling the remaining leaves like a secret being shared too soon. I could feel the chill seeping through my sweater as I stood on the porch, watching my husband, Mark, chase our two young kids around the yard. Their laughter echoed brightly, cutting through the quiet hum of distant traffic on the highway. Little Emma, with her pigtails bouncing, squealed as she dodged her brother's playful tackle, the grass soft and damp under their sneakers, leaving faint imprints in the earth. The sun hung low, casting a warm golden glow that filtered through the thinning canopy, painting everything in hues of amber and shadow. My name is Sarah, and at that moment, life felt as perfect as a family photo album, polished, framed, and full of smiles. Mark and I had been married for 8 years, building our home in this quiet neighborhood where the houses stood like sentinels, each with manicured lawns and welcoming front doors. Our son, Tommy, was 6, full of boundless energy that left him with scraped knees and dirt-streaked cheeks by day's end. Emma, for years old, was the heart of our world, her tiny hands always reaching for hugs that smelled of strawberry shampoo and innocence. But the anchor of it all was Mark's father, Robert, Pop, as the kids called him. He lived just a few blocks away in a modest ranch-style house, the one where Mark had grown up. Robert was the epitome of the doting grandfather, always ready with stories from his simple life as a retired accountant, his voice gravelly from years of pipe smoking, carrying the faint aroma of cherry tobacco that clung to his flannel shirts. That day, as the kids collapsed in a heap of giggles on the porch steps, their cheeks flushed from the cool air and exertion, Robert pulled up in his old Ford pickup, the engine rumbling like a contented bear. The truck's tires crunched over the gravel driveway, and I waved as he stepped out, his boots thudding solidly on the ground. He was a sturdy man in his late 60s, with silver hair cropped short and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Hey there, family," he called out, his voice warm and steady, like the crackle of a fireplace on a winter night. The kids rushed him, wrapping their arms around his legs, and he scooped them up one by one, planting kisses on their foreheads that left behind the soft bristle of his mustache. We gathered inside for dinner, the house filling with the savory scent of pot roast simmering in the slow cooker, rich beef mingled with onions, carrots, and a hint of rosemary that made my mouth water. The kitchen was cozy, lit by the soft overhead light that cast a gentle warmth over the wooden table, where steam rose from the plates like inviting ghosts. As we ate, the clink of forks against ceramic plates punctuated our conversation, and Robert regaled us with tales of his youth, always skirting around details with a chuckle. Back in the day, I was just a numbers guy, crunching figures in a dusty office, he'd say, his calloused hands gesturing animatedly, the roughness of his palms a testament to hobbies like woodworking in his garage, where the air always smelled of sawdust and varnish. But there was something in his eyes that evening, a fleeting shadow, like a cloud passing over the moon. When Mark asked about an old photo album Robert had promised to bring over, he hesitated, his fork pausing mid-air, the steam from his food curling lazily upward. "Oh, that? Must have misplaced it," he muttered, his voice dropping an octave, the words heavy with an unspoken weight. I felt a slight chill run down my spine, unrelated to the draft from the window, but I brushed it off as the kids chatted on, their voices a joyful cacophony that drowned out any unease. Little did I know, that seemingly ordinary dinner was the beginning of unraveling a tapestry woven with lies, where the warmth of family bonds hid the cold steel of secrets long buried. As the evening wound down, with the kids' eyelids drooping from exhaustion, their small bodies warm and heavy in our arms as we carried them to bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that not everything was what it seemed. The next morning dawned with a gentle rain pattering against the window panes, the sound like tiny fingers tapping for attention. The air inside the house was thick with the aroma of fresh coffee brewing, its bitter richness cutting through the dampness seeping in from outside. I stood in the kitchen, my bare feet cool on the tiled floor, watching droplets race down the glass as Mark hurried out the door for work, his briefcase thumping against his thigh. He kissed me goodbye, his lips warm and familiar, tasting faintly of toothpaste, and whispered, "Love you, Sarah. Tell Pop I'll swing by after work." Robert had become a fixture in our lives since Mark's mother passed away 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack. The memory of that day still lingered like a faint ache, the sterile smell of the hospital room, the beeping monitors that echoed our grief, the way Robert's shoulders had slumped under the fluorescent lights, his face etched with lines of sorrow. He'd moved closer to us then, selling the family home in rural Illinois and settling into the neighborhood, his presence a comforting constant. He helped with the kids, fixing leaky faucets with tools that clanged in his toolbox, the metallic tang mixing with the sweat on his brow. But that rainy morning, as I dropped the kids at school, their raincoats slick and shiny, boots squelching on the wet pavement, I decided to surprise Robert with some homemade muffins. The bakery scent of cinnamon and blueberries filled my car, warm against the chill outside. Pulling up to his house, the wipers swishing rhythmically, I noticed his truck was gone, unusual for a man who claimed retirement meant lazy mornings with the newspaper. I let myself in with the spare key, the door creaking open to reveal the dim hallway, lit only by a sliver of gray light from the storm clouds. The air inside was stale, carrying the musty odor of old books and faint pipe smoke. "Pop? You here?" I called, my voice echoing slightly off the walls adorned with faded family photos, though I'd never seen any from before Mark was born. No response came, only the tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the living room, its pendulum swinging with metronomic precision. Curiosity tugged at me like an invisible thread as I set the muffins on the kitchen counter, the surface cool and slightly sticky from recent use. Wandering into his study, a room I'd rarely entered, I felt the carpet soft underfoot, muffling my steps. The desk was cluttered with papers, the faint scent of ink and aged wood enveloping me. A drawer stood slightly ajar, as if hastily closed, and before I could think better of it, my fingers, trembling slightly from the cool air, pulled it open. Inside lay a yellowed envelope, its edges frayed like forgotten memories. My heart quickened, a subtle thump against my ribs, as I lifted it, feeling the crinkle of paper within. Scrawled on the front in faded ink were the words "For emergencies only." The rain intensified outside, drumming on the roof like an urgent warning, but I slid out the contents, a stack of old newspaper clippings, their print smudged but legible under the desk lamp's warm glow. The headlines screamed silently: "Bank heist in small-town Illinois leaves 2 dead, suspects at large after daring robbery, mystery man evades capture." My breath caught, the air suddenly thick and oppressive, as I scanned the articles. Dates from over 40 years ago, descriptions of a masked figure who vanished into the night, leaving behind the acrid smell of gunfire and the wail of sirens. One clipping mentioned a distinctive tattoo, a coiled serpent on the forearm, something I'd glimpsed on Robert's arm during a summer barbecue, hidden under rolled-up sleeves. A wave of nausea washed over me, cold and clammy, as the pieces clicked into place like a lock tumbling open. The room spun slightly, the shadows from the rain-streaked windows dancing mockingly. Was this the man we trusted with our children? The one whose hugs felt safe, whose laughter filled our home with joy? I stuffed the papers back, my hands shaking, the envelopes flap rough against my skin, and fled the house, the door slamming behind me with a finality that echoed in my soul. Driving home through the downpour, wipers slashing furiously, my mind raced with questions, each one a stab of betrayal. How could Mark not know? Or did he? The thought chilled me deeper than the rain ever could. That evening, as the storm subsided to a gentle drizzle, the air fresh and cleansed, Mark returned home to find me pacing the living room. The kids were upstairs, their voices muffled as they played with toys, the clatter of blocks a stark contrast to the turmoil in my chest. The lamp cast a soft amber light, but it did little to warm the cold knot in my stomach. "Sarah, what's wrong?" Mark asked, his brow furrowing, the scent of his cologne, woody and reassuring, mingling with the residual rain on his coat. I hesitated, the words sticking like syrup in my throat, but then I told him everything, my voice low and trembling, describing the clipping's brittle texture, the faded ink that detailed a crime from another lifetime. His face paled, the color draining like water from a sieve, and he sank onto the couch, the cushions sighing under his weight. "That can't be." "Pop?" "No, he's Dad," he whispered, his hands clenching into fists, knuckles whitening. We decided to confront him, the decision hanging heavy in the air like unspoken regret. The next day, under a sky cleared to brilliant blue, the sun's warmth a deceptive comfort on our skin, we drove to Robert's house. The birds chirped merrily in the trees, their songs oblivious to our dread. He opened the door, his smile faltering as he saw our expressions, the lines around his eyes deepening with concern. "Come in, kids." "What's this about?" he said, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of wariness, ushering us into the living room where the air still held the faint mustiness from the rain. Seated on the worn sofa, its fabric soft and familiar from countless visits, I pulled out the envelope I'd taken, guilt twisting in my gut like a knife. "Pop, explain this," Mark demanded, his tone sharp, the words slicing through the tension. Robert's eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing his face like a shadow, and he sighed deeply, the sound ragged, as if releasing a burden carried for decades. "It was a different time," he began, his voice cracking slightly, the weight of years pressing down. "I was young, stupid, desperate. Grew up poor, no prospects. Fell in with the wrong crowd." The room fell silent save for the distant hum of a lawnmower outside, the grass scent wafting in through an open window. He described the heist in halting words, the adrenaline rush, the cold metal of the gun in his hand, the deafening blasts that left his ears ringing, the metallic tang of blood in the air. He'd escaped, changed his name, built a new life, marrying Mark's mother who never knew the full truth. "I left that man behind," he said, tears glistening in his eyes, the saltiness evident as one traced down his cheek. "For you, for the family." Mark's anger boiled over, his face reddening, heat radiating from him as he stood abruptly, the floorboards creaking under his feet. "How could you lie to us all these years? What if they find you? What about the kids?" The words hung in the air, charged with emotion, the room feeling smaller, suffocating. I placed a hand on Mark's arm, feeling the tension in his muscles, taut like wires. Robert reached out, his hand trembling, the skin papery and warm, but Mark pulled away, the rejection stinging like a slap. We left in a storm of silence, the door closing softly behind us, but the echo of betrayal lingered. Days blurred into weeks, the autumn leaves turning fiery red and orange, crunching underfoot with each step, their decay mirroring the rot in our family. Mark withdrew, his touches brief and distant, the bed cold at night despite the blankets. The kids sensed the shift, their questions innocent but piercing. "Why doesn't Pop come over anymore?" Their small faces puzzled, eyes wide with confusion. I delved deeper, unable to let go, spending evenings in the dim light of my laptop screen, the keyboard clicks a rhythmic companion. The glow cast eerie shadows on the walls, and I uncovered more, witness statements from the old case, a cold trail that suddenly warmed with recent online forums buzzing about unsolved crimes. The air in the room grew heavy with the scent of my cooling tea, chamomile failing to soothe my frayed nerves. One night, as thunder rumbled in the distance, heralding another storm, a knock echoed through the house. Mark answered, and there stood a detective, badge glinting under the porch light, rain dripping from his coat. "We're reopening the case," he said, his voice gravelly, the words dropping like stones into still water. Robert's past had caught up, tipped off by an anonymous source, perhaps a former associate sensing opportunity. The arrest came swiftly, handcuffs clicking coldly around Robert's wrists as we watched from afar, the metal chill seeping into my imagination. The courtroom was a sensory assault, the polished wood benches hard under us, the murmur of voices like a hive, the sharp scent of floor wax and anxiety sweat. Robert pleaded guilty, his confession a torrent of remorse, voice breaking as he described the lives shattered, the guilt that had gnawed at him like a persistent ache. But twists emerged. Mark's mother had known fragments, protecting him out of love. And in a letter from prison, Robert revealed he'd stashed away money from the heist, now a college fund for the grandkids, tainted but intended as redemption. The paper crinkled in my hands, ink smudged from tears, his or mine, I couldn't tell. Forgiveness came slowly, like spring thawing winter's grip. Visits to the prison, the clang of gates echoing, the sterile air cold and unforgiving. Conversations mended bridges, emotions raw and exposed, hugs through glass partitions a poor substitute but laden with meaning. In the end, our family emerged scarred but stronger, the secrets aired like laundry in the sun, fresh and clean. Robert's legacy became one of caution and love, a reminder that not everything is what it seems, but redemption waits for those who seek it. As the seasons shifted from the crisp bite of autumn to the harsh embrace of winter, the world outside our windows transformed into a blanket of white, the snow muffling sounds and insulating us in a cocoon of quiet reflection. The air carried the sharp, clean scent of frost, and each breath I took outdoors left a visible puff, like whispers made manifest. Inside, the house was a haven of warmth, the radiator humming steadily, the aroma of cinnamon sticks simmering on the stove weaving through the rooms to chase away the chill. Mark and I navigated the aftermath of Robert's revelation with tentative steps, our conversations late into the night, voices low under the soft glow of the bedside lamp, its light casting long shadows that danced like unresolved doubts on the walls. Tommy and Emma, resilient in their youth, adapted with the innocence of children. Tommy's questions came in bursts, his small hands fidgeting with the hem of his pajama shirt, soft cotton warmed by his body heat. "Is Papa bad guy, Mom?" he'd ask, his eyes wide and trusting, the room filled with the faint scent of his bubble bath from earlier. I'd pull him close, feeling the rapid beat of his heart against mine, and explain in simple terms, the words tasting bittersweet on my tongue, how people make mistakes, but love can heal. Emma, with her thumb in her mouth, would listen silently, her curls tickling my chin as she nestled in, her warmth a balm against the cold knot of worry in my chest. Mark struggled most, his anger simmering like a pot left too long on the stove, the steam building until it whistled. At work, he'd come home exhausted, the lines on his face deeper, etched by betrayal, his shoulders tense under my touch as I massaged them, feeling the knots like twisted roots. One evening, as snowflakes swirled outside like confetti in a storm, he confessed over dinner, the clink of silverware pausing as he spoke. "I feel like my whole childhood was a lie," he said, voice thick with emotion, the steam from his soup rising to blur his features slightly. The kitchen light overhead buzzed faintly, a reminder of the mundane amid chaos. We visited Robert in prison every other weekend, the drive long and silent at first, the highway humming under the tires, the air inside the car thick with unspoken words. The prison loomed like a gray monolith against the snowy landscape, its walls cold and unyielding to the touch as we passed through security, the beep of metal detectors piercing the air. Inside, the visiting room smelled of institutional cleaner, harsh and chemical, mixed with the faint sweat of desperation. Robert looked friendlier each time, his prison jumpsuit hanging loosely, the fabric rough against his skin, his eyes lighting up at the sight of us, crinkling with a mix of joy and regret. "Miss you all," he'd say, his voice muffled through the phone receiver, warm plastic pressed to my ear. We'd talk about the kids' school plays, the scent of popcorn and excitement lingering in my memory as I described them, or Mark's promotion at work, the pride in his tone warring with resentment. Touch was forbidden, but emotions flowed freely, tears sometimes tracing hot paths down my cheeks, salt on my lips. Back home, life pressed on. The holidays approached, the air alive with the jingle of bells from neighborhood decorations, the scent of pine from our tree filling the living room, its needles soft and prickly underfoot as we hung ornaments. But the absence of Robert cast a shadow, the empty chair at the table a silent accusation. Mark and I argued more, our voices rising like the wind howling outside, words sharp as icicles. "How can you forgive him so easily?" he'd snap, pacing the floor, boards creaking, his breath coming in frustrated huffs. I'd counter with pleas for understanding, my hands gesturing, palms warm from clenching. One blizzardy night, as winds whipped snow against the windows with furious gusts, rattling the panes, a phone call shattered the fragile peace. It was Robert's lawyer, voice crisp and professional over the line, static crackling like distant thunder. "New evidence," he said, the words hanging heavy. An accomplice from the heist had come forward, confessing to the murders, exonerating Robert partially. He'd been the driver, not the triggerman. My heart raced, a thrum in my ears louder than the storm, as I relayed the news to Mark, his face illuminating in the firelight from the hearth, flames crackling and popping, warmth spreading across the room. The twist reignited old wounds but offered hope, like sunlight piercing clouds. Mark's resolve softened, the ice in his eyes melting as we discussed it, curled on the couch, blankets soft and heavy around us, the scent of wood smoke comforting. We hired a better lawyer, dipping into savings, the paperwork crisp and official, ink scent lingering on my fingers. Spring arrived with a thaw, rivers of meltwater gurgling in the streets, the air fresh with earth and budding flowers. Robert's retrial loomed, the courtroom again a sensory barrage, the echo of gavel strikes, the rustle of papers, the tense hush of spectators. Testimonies unfolded, voices varying from steady to quavering, emotions thick in the air like humidity. In a dramatic turn, the accomplice testified, his words halting, the microphone amplifying his breaths. Robert didn't know about the guns, he admitted, guilt etching his face, visible in the way his hands trembled on the stand. The jury deliberated, hours stretching like taffy, our waits in the hallway filled with the click of heels on tile, the vending machines hummed dispensing bitter coffee. The verdict, guilty of lesser charges, time served considered. Robert walked free, steps tentative on the courthouse steps, the spring breeze ruffling his hair, carrying the scent of freedom. We embraced him, his arms strong despite frailty, the fabric of his suit rough, tears mingling on our cheeks. Reintegration was rocky, like navigating uneven terrain. Dinners resumed, but conversations tiptoed around the past, the clink of glasses tentative. The kids warmed quickly, their hugs enthusiastic, small bodies colliding with his, laughter bubbling like a stream. Yet, another layer peeled back when Robert confessed more. The stashed money wasn't just for college, part-funded anonymous donations to the victims' families, a quiet atonement. Mark's forgiveness deepened, a hug shared in the garage amid sawdust scent, tools clanging as they worked side by side. Our family healed, scars fading like old bruises, stronger in the mending. Secrets, once burdensome, became stories of resilience, told under starlit skies, the night air cool and alive with crickets' chirps. Summer enveloped us in its humid embrace, the air thick and sticky, carrying the sweet scent of blooming lilacs from the neighbor's yard and the distant sizzle of barbecues. The sun beat down relentlessly, warming the asphalt until it radiated heat like a living thing, and the kids splashed in the backyard kiddie pool, their shrieks of delight piercing the lazy drone of bees. Water droplets flew through the air, cool and refreshing on my skin as I watched from the shade of the porch, the wooden slats creaking under my rocking chair, a glass of iced tea sweating in my hand, condensation trickling down my fingers. Robert had moved in with us temporarily, his house sold to cover legal fees, the transition marked by boxes thumping on floors and the faint musty smell of stored belongings. His presence filled the home with a new rhythm, the early morning clatter of coffee brewing, his gravelly hum as he read the paper, the pages rustling softly. Mark and he rebuilt their bond through small acts, fishing trips at the nearby lake, the water lapping gently against the boat, the tangy scent of bait and earthworms mingling with sunscreen. Hooks plunked into the water, lines whispering out, and stories flowed, not of the past's darkness, but of hopes for the future. But peace was fleeting. One sweltering afternoon, as thunderheads built on the horizon, dark and ominous, promising relief in rain, a stranger appeared at our door. He was tall, withered, with a scar tracing his jawline, visible in the harsh sunlight filtering through the screen. His knock was firm, knuckles rapping sharply, and when Mark answered, the man's voice was low and accented, carrying the faint odor of cigarette smoke on his breath. "I'm looking for Bob, old friend from way back," he said, eyes scanning the interior, a predatory glint that sent a shiver down my spine despite the heat. Robert paled when we told him, his coffee cup trembling in his grip, hot liquid sloshing slightly. "He's from the old crew," he whispered later, in the dim kitchen light as evening fell, cicadas chirping outside in a symphony of summer. The air grew heavier with impending storm, electricity crackling in the atmosphere. The man, Vince, wanted his share of the long-lost loot, threats veiled in casual words, his presence lingering like a bad aftertaste. Tension mounted as Vince lurked, phone calls in the night jarring us awake, the ring shrill and insistent. Mark's protectiveness surged, his jaw clenching, muscles taut as he paced, the floor warm underfoot from the day's heat. We involved the police, but evidence was thin, the detective's voice sympathetic yet helpless over the line, papers shuffling in the background. One stormy night, lightning flashing like camera bulbs, illuminating the room in stark white bursts, Vince broke in. The crash of glass shattered the silence, rain pounding the roof like drums. Adrenaline surged through me, heart pounding, as I grabbed the kids, their small bodies trembling in my arms, pajamas soft and damp with fierce sweat. Mark confronted him in the living room, voices rising over thunder, furniture scraping as they scuffled, the metallic tang of blood filling the air from a split lip. Robert intervened, his voice steady amid chaos, revealing he'd turned the remaining money over to authorities years ago. Vince's rage peaked, but police sirens wailed in the distance, lights pulsing red and blue through the windows, rain-slicked officers bursting in, handcuffs clicking. The ordeal bonded us further, fear forging unbreakable ties. As summer waned, leaves hinting at yellow, we reflected on resilience, picnics in the park with grass tickling our skin, laughter echoing freely. Fall returned, a cycle complete, but our story evolved, secrets transformed into strength. With the resolution of Vince's threat, a fragile normalcy settled over our home like a gentle fog rolling in from the lake, muting the sharp edges of recent events. The air turned cooler again, carrying the earthy scent of harvested fields from beyond the suburbs, and the kids returned to school, their backpacks thumping against their backs, pencils scratching on paper in classrooms alive with the buzz of young voices. Robert found purpose in volunteering at a local community center, his steps lighter, the clink of keys in his pocket a soundtrack to his comings and goings. Yet, beneath the surface, ripples of doubt persisted. I found myself questioning every anecdote Robert shared, his laughter now tinged with scrutiny in my ears. One chilly evening, as wind whistled through cracks in the windows, rattling the frames, I discovered an old journal in his belongings, leather-bound, pages yellowed and crisp, ink faded but poignant. Hidden in a box under his bed, the cardboard musty from storage, it chronicled his life before the heist, a troubled youth, abusive home, the desperation that drove him to crime. Words leaped out, regret, love for a lost sibling, the cold grip of poverty. Tears blurred my vision, hot and stinging, as I read by flashlight, its beam narrow and focused, the house silent save for Mark's soft snores from down the hall. Sharing it with Mark the next morning, over breakfast, the sizzle of bacon in the pan, grease popping, aroma savory and comforting, he absorbed the revelations, his fork pausing, coffee steam curling upward. He never told me about his brother, he murmured, voice soft, the weight of untold stories pressing down. We confronted Robert gently, and the living room bathed in morning light, sunbeams warming the carpet. His confession flowed, tears tracing wrinkled cheeks, the salt evident as he wiped them away with a trembling hand. Lost him young, to the streets. That's why I changed, for a second chance. This deepened our understanding, empathy blooming like flowers after rain. Family therapy sessions followed, the counselor's office smelling of lavender diffuser, chairs plush and inviting, voices exploring pains like delicate surgery. Emotions surfaced, Mark's abandonment fears, my trust issues from a distant father, Robert's guilt a constant companion. Twists continued, a letter from the victim's family, forgiving, paper smooth, words healing. It arrived on a blustery day, envelope crinkling in my hands, wind snatching at it. As years passed, marked by birthdays, the sweet scent of cake and blown-out candles, graduations, the rustle of gowns and cheers echoing, we wove Robert's past into our narrative, a cautionary thread strengthening the fabric. In quiet moments, under blankets by the fire, crackles and pops accompanying stories, we found peace. Not everything was what it seemed, but in unveiling, we discovered true bonds.